Hi, I'm Dr. Andrew Holden. I'm an interventional radiologist from Auckland, New Zealand, and I have with me well-known vascular surgeon Dr. Peter Schneider from Hawaii in the US, and spending some time now in the mainland. And Peter, we're here to discuss the Tack Endovascular System from Intact Vascular, and maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the design of this device.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. The Tack Endovascular System, the concept is to design the most biologically inert implant that we can that would be used in the lower extremity arteries to try to avoid some of the problems that we've had with stenting. You've been in this game as long as I have, so you have this feeling, probably like I do, that the metal scaffolds that we have for the leg are not perfect, and actually the stenting paradigm for the lower extremity is quite clunky. You have to pick one that's perfectly sized to the vessel. You have to pick just the right length, and then you're frequently left with a lot of healthier artery covered.
That you're covering with a stent.
That you wouldn't otherwise necessarily want to if you had something different. So the idea here is this is a point and shoot device. You have multiple tacks on a single delivery system. You have the ability to go down the leg, whether you're going with plain balloon angioplasty or drug-coated balloon angioplasty. It doesn't really matter with this device, but we do know that when we go down the leg with multiple balloon dilatations, we create dissection wherever we go. And when we leave those dissections behind, the potential for a poor outcome is high. And so rather than having the limitations, in my opinion, of the current stenting paradigm, you have now the ability to do a spot treatment wherever you need to, again, with multiple devices on a single catheter. So what that does for you is it really diminishes the number of stents you're going to need on the shelf of different sizes and different lengths. The other thing about the Tack Endovascular System is it has what I would call a flat force curve. And so all of the self-expanding nitinol stents that we have, when you squeeze them, they push back. And the more you squeeze, the more they push back. And so we know that when we oversize a self-expanding nitinol stent, the potential then for in-stent restenosis is quite high. And so this stent sizing is a big deal. With the Tack, it exerts approximately the same force at different diameter sizes. Again, so the concept of having a single-use device that you can go down and treat the leg in multiple places, even if the artery is tapering, and still have a relatively biologically inert implant. So, I mean, to me, it's extremely exciting because we just recently had a post-market approval by the FDA, and what this means for us is that now this device is finally on the shelf, as we have hoped it would be for some time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's really an unmet need from my perspective. You know, as you mentioned, we used to be more aggressive with oversizing with self-expanding stents, and as you say, that ongoing outward force was causing ongoing injury and produced this intense neointimal hyperplasia that the sort of adaptive remodeling of the tack hopefully will overcome. You mentioned, dissection. We know that predicts restenosis both above and below the knee. And I think we probably have been a little more blasé about trying to assess and quantify dissection. I think particularly below the knee because it's often tough. We know it's very prevalent. We know it predicts restenosis, but you've got to take a lot of time to identify it. So I think these studies, these tack studies that we'll discuss, have heightened our awareness of dissection, but also given us an ability to focally deal with this dissection. So I think that does represent a real advance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in the pre-stent era, we spent a lot more time looking at dissections, worrying about them, trying to anticipate whether they would have a negative effect if left behind. In the stent era, we sort of stopped doing it. At least I stopped doing it. I just looked, where is the artery healthier above and where is it healthier below, and picked a stent that covered the whole thing. So in that sense, the concept of spot treatment, and that is the concept of just putting what you need to and no more, it does a couple of things. One is it returns control of the procedure to the operator. So in other words, as an experienced operator, you're looking at a dissection and you're anticipating that this dissection is too severe to leave behind, you can just treat that part.
Yep.
And that's a huge benefit of this. The other thing that I think is worth keeping in mind is something that, just to emphasize something you already mentioned, and that is the severity of dissection and what does it mean. And we know that it's correlated with restenosis. We know that it's correlated with failure, but we are currently really learning so much more now about dissection and which ones need to be treated than we did during the so-called stent era, where everybody just got a metal jacket and that was that. In the more recent time frame, with the development of drug-coated balloons, I think it has really pushed us to justify how much metal we're going to place. And this gives, again, the doctor the ability to do a dose response, which we haven't really had before with our, what I called our rather clunky stenting paradigm. Now with spot treatment or focal dissection repair with the Tack, some of those concerns are obviated. I'm wondering, Andrew, I think you participated in a number of studies using the Tack, correct? Can you tell a little bit about your experience with that?
Well, I think what I'll do is focus on my below-the-knee experience, because we've done a lot of that, and maybe get you to summarize the above-knee experience. But we were very lucky to get involved in the TOBA BTK first-in-human trial, which was really an early safety and feasibility trial for tibial arteries. And I learned a number of things. One was dissection was much more prevalent, but you've got to take the time to high frame rate angiography, various projections to profile. And secondly, that this was a very easy and successful procedure to do. A 4 French system on an 014 wire, you could get very accurate with your deployment of the tacks. Often you just needed 1 or 2 tacks appropriately placed to deal with this. And in this very early trial, we saw sort of primary patencies. Remember, primary patencies with below-knee angioplasty is usually at or below 50% at 12 months, but we were seeing primary patencies, in the 70s and a primary assisted in the high 80s. So there was a signal there that this is something worthwhile pursuing, and we've been lucky enough to be involved in the much larger BTK2 trial, which is broadening our experience, and that has fully recruited, and we're in follow-up. So in the next few months, we're going to see some results of that, and I really look forward to it. So I think below the knee, I think we've underappreciated the severity of dissection. Really, the only things we've had is prolonged balloon angioplasty and drug-eluting coronary stents, which are very focal, short, and are really only suited to the proximal tibial arteries. This device, I think, can treat the whole tibial vessel. What about in the femoral-popliteal segment, maybe the evidence behind it, and also your own experience, with the ability actually to maintain physiology in terms of things like the popliteal artery and, with flexing and extending the knee, how these devices are coping with that kind of physiological changes in the femoral-popliteal segment?
Right, that's a good point, and we didn't touch on that specifically, and I think, one of the benefits of not covering more artery than you need to is in those at those flexion points in the lower extremity, the potential then for things like stent fracture to occur, which is quite high in the popliteal artery, depending on which stent you look at. With the Tack, there were no stent fractures in our studies. With regards to the FemPop segment, there is a gathering of data that has accumulated. As you know, it's approved for above-the-knee usage by CE Mark and also by the FDA. So the way that started was when I had the opportunity to do a first-in-human study, which was conducted in Paraguay a few years ago. And in that study, we treated both.
Above and below.
Above and below the knee with quite a good, about 83% patency at 1 year, and then that stimulated us then to push to the next level. And so some of those other studies included the TOBA trial, or so-called TOBA 1, which was 138 patients in the EU, primarily in the EU, and that was superficial femoral and popliteal artery, and that had nearly 80% Kaplan-Meier patency at 1 year, again with no stent fractures or dislodgements. So then that led to the pivotal trial in the U.S., which was the TOBA 2 trial, and that trial had what I would consider a unique trial design, and that is that the operator had the choice of whether when they had a dissection, to use drug-coated balloon plus tack, or to use plain balloon plus tack. And by doing that, we gained a wealth of experience with both plain balloon and DCB in both arms. The patients that had DCB plus tack did better than DCB alone. The patients that had POBA plus tack did better than POBA alone. So it gave us a lot of encouragement. Of course, since this was our pivotal trial, this led to approval of the device. At this point, between some of the below-the-knee experience that you've cited and some of the above-the-knee that I've talked about, there are more than 800 patients treated just within these trials, and now there are hundreds more that have been treated commercially now that the device is becoming more available in a variety of places.
One of the interesting points that I got from TOBA 2, and maybe you can comment on, is what is now fairly routine practice, which is pre-dilatation, drug-coated balloon angioplasty, and then the vessels receive the drug and then a spot stent. One of the worries is that, if you're basically trapping drug in behind stent struts, you may have higher doses retained and maybe there'd be some negative effects. But really there's very little metal with this device, so it seems ideal as a device for dealing with post-DCB dissection that you might want to focally stent.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think also just back to some of the issues of the design of the device, we mentioned that it had the flat force curve. So again, it's not exerting undue pressure. We mentioned that there were multiple on a single delivery catheter. The other thing is that I didn't mention was the issue of actual metal coverage, the size and composition of the tines or struts of the stent. And what we find when we compare the tack to a standard available nitinol stent for the SFA is a reduction in metal of at least 70%, and very often more than 70% reduction. And so this, kind of goes back to what you were saying about whichever therapy you choose to gain the lumen, whether it's a DCB or a plain balloon, we know that the mechanism of balloon expansion in these unhealthy arteries is dissection. And so this idea then, focal dissection repair, I think, is one that's finally come.
And I think in practice you think of your inventory to manage patients, and one of the nice things about this, of course, is we kind of probably didn't specify, is that there is a single above-the-knee device that will cope with a wide range of sizes because of that flat stress curve, and also a single BTK device, so you can treat vessels between 1.5 and 4 millimeters below the knee, for example, with a single device. So in terms of the inventory, it's very, very feasible to have some of these, a limited number of these devices available, and you're not having to carry a wide range of sizes. I guess finally, Peter, what's next in terms of the evidence in the infrainguinal segment? I mean, we probably are still limited, although we've got the vessels, the sizes for the femoral-popliteal segment. Sometimes we see larger vessels, and there's also this issue of various calcified stenoses that have a dissection or a residual stenosis. And what's in the future that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so you've now that we've got this kind of a core demonstration of value, what are the other areas that we need to include? So I think this is a great question. So a couple of things. On the clinical trials, we have enrolled so-called TOBA 2 BTK. And I think you participated in this one. And what this is a below-the-knee trial of plain angioplasty plus tack. And this actually is a pivotal trial. And when it has been enrolled, once the data is completely adjudicated, this will be presented ultimately to the FDA as a pivotal trial. If approved, it would be the first below-the-knee implant in the U.S. I realize there are approved implants in other geographies. The other trial that has enrolled is the TOBA 3 trial. This was enrolled primarily in Europe and a couple of other places. And this was the use of the TAC plus the impact DCB. And this also included a long lesion cohort. And of course, we all know that the long lesions are where the rubber meets the road, where we worry about the sort of efficacy of our endovascular approaches. So we're going to learn a lot from that. And then in addition to that, we have now the potential to have the commercial usage and to learn a lot from that. And when you add it all up, all the things that we're learning now or relearning or learning better than we knew before about dissection and which ones are important, I think, again, it's a situation, it's a concern that applies to whether it's POBA or DCB. It's true that you have to manage the dissections.
Okay, well, I think on that note, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think we've learned a lot about the Tack Endovascular System, and I think it's exciting times for our therapy.
Agreed. Fantastic. Thank you.